going on, RP fam? Thank you guys so much for taking some time out of your busy day to join me for another video. In it, I'm going to go over the top 32 options at running back. We're going to hit your ones, your twos, and your flexes as well. Try to get you all the information you are going to need to make the best decisions possible. And that way, hopefully you can go get a dub and keep pushing towards that championship. If you have not visited Relentless Press before, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I drop 10 videos or more every single week, Monday to Friday. I'm usually dropping them at 12 p.m. Pacific, so you always know when they are going to be available. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoy the content today, and be aware that we have games coming in on Saturday this week, which means my updated ranking shorts are going to be out earlier. I'm going to try to get all of those out by Friday night. With the I's dotted and the T's crossed, let's hop into Week 16's running back rankings. In at number 1, I have Derrick Henry. He is at home against Houston. He's heated up over his last 2 games, rumbling for 318 total yards and a pair of scores with 2 top 7 finishes. He has absolutely no ceiling against the Texans. I think he's a lock for another 100-plus yard game, and he scores a tutty. To 2, it is Christian McCaffrey at home against Washington. He continues to feast. He posted his 3rd straight top 5 finish against Seattle last week, and although this matchup is rough, the Commanders allow the 8th fewest points per game to the position. I think CMC's talent and volume are once again going to produce a big day. In at number 3 is Austin pound for pound Ekeler, who dodged an injury scare early against the Titans, but he struggled once he returned, posting a middling day by his high standards. After seeing 29 targets between weeks 12 and 14, Ekeler had just 3 of them against Tennessee. If those do not come back, he will underwhelm. But the last 2 times that he has seen 5 targets or less through the air, he's followed those games up with 15 targets or more the next one. At 4, and at the top of tier 2, is Josh Jacobs. He had a decent day against the Patriots' vaunted front, but he finally broke his streak of 5 consecutive games with a top 10 finish. Pittsburgh is going to be another tough matchup for him. They've allowed just a single score on the ground in their last 3 games, so you are banking on the volume. However, that will be enough. Jacobs is averaging over 30 touches in his last 4 games. To round out my top 5, I have Saquon Barkley, who posted his 2nd top 10 finish in his last 3 games, both of those coming against a solid Commanders run defense, so you have to have confidence in him against the Vikings. Minnesota has allowed 1 rushing score per game on this season, and I am betting Saquon is the one who cashes in on that. Dalvin Cook on the other side of the field is at 6. He exploded for his best game of the year against the Colts. He racked up 190 total yards and scored a touchdown. He was the overall RB2 in week 15. The Giants are a bottom 10 unit to the position. They allow nearly 22 points a game on the season, and they've been even worse as of late, giving up 6.2 yards per carry over their last 3. That is 2nd worst in the NFL. It's an easy game plan here for the Vikings. Let Dalvin cook. At 7, and at the top of tier 3, I have Tony Pollard, who did not quite go off as expected against the Jags, but he was still able to produce over 100 total yards of offense on 23 touches. Philly has been weak against the run over their last 3 games. They're allowing nearly 5 yards a carry, which is bottom 8 in the NFL, and I think Pollard takes advantage of it. The last 2 times that he has failed to get inside of the top 10, like he did last week, he posted a top 5 finish immediately after, and Dallas is going to need him to keep up with the Eagles. Rhamondre Stevenson is in at number 8. He was apparently just fine against the Raiders, so my apologies for keeping him out of my rankings. Bill Belichick's trickery wins again. Gotta hate it. Stevenson could struggle to find room against a stout Bengals front here, but his ability in the passing game and the usage that he is seeing on the ground is going to help carry him to another top 10 finish because the Patriots basically have no offense without him. At 9, I have Nick Chubb. He gets a home matchup with New Orleans. He piled up the yardage last week, but he failed to cross the goal line for the 3rd consecutive game, which is easily his longest drought of the season. The Saints gave up nearly 6 yards per carry last week against Atlanta, so Chubb is going to destroy them. I think he scores a tutty here. He gets back into the top 10 for the first time since back in week 12. At the top of tier 4 and at number 10, I have Joe Mixon, who struggled mightily against the Bucs. He posted 54 total yards on 16 touches. He's now had under 12 carries in 2 out of his last 3 games, and he hasn't had the passing game work to help offset that loss. I think that makes him riskier in the top 10 than he should be, but Cincy's offense gives him more than enough upside to still make him a smash play. At 11, it is James Conner against Tampa Bay. He's made it 3 straight top 12 finishes with an excellent performance against the Broncos. He totaled 91 total yards and he scored. I am worried about this matchup because what the Bucs just did to our previous guy in Joe Mixon, but the Cardinals do not have very many options outside of Nuke, of course. If Colt McCoy is unable to go here, Connor is going to drop significantly, so check back in on Friday night for my updated short rankings. The last RB1 that I have in week 16 is Ken Walker traveling to Kansas City. He predictably struggled last week against a brutal 49ers front, but he still compiled a respectable 79 total yards on 16 touches. The bigger and better news is that he did not appear to suffer any setbacks, which is going to be key because the Hawks are going to have to lean on him a little bit more with Tyler Lockett out. I expect 20 plus touches for Walker in a shootout with the Chiefs, and he's going to be a big part of everything that the Hawks do. To 13, it is Najee Harris at home against Las Vegas. He has posted back-to-back top 15 finishes for the first time all season, using some massive volume against Carolina to post 86 yards on the ground. That was the second time he did that in his last 3 games. He also had 2 touchdowns stolen from him last week at the goal line, or his day would have been even bigger. Vegas just got demolished by Rhamondre Stevenson. They gave up nearly 6.5 yards per carry against him, so I would not be surprised to see Najee post a top 10 finish. At 14, it is Aaron Jones against Miami. He could shoot up these rankings depending on what we hear about A.J. Dillon, but regardless, you are starting him in a matchup that is worse than it looks like on paper. Miami has allowed just 4.1 yards per carry over their last 3 games. That is 7th best in the NFL. They have tightened up down the stretch. To tier 5, I have Miles Sanders at 15. He crashed back down to earth really hard in a great matchup with Chicago, but I am going to consider this a one-off in what was a pretty poor game for most of the Eagles combined. Sanders is unlikely to post another top 5 finish as he has in 2 out of his last 4, but he's still a borderline RB1 in a tough matchup because of the potency of Philly's offense. Sanders put up 71 yards. He also scored in a meeting with Dallas in week number 6. He finished as the RB14. Now, just like James Conner, if Jalen Hurts cannot go, I will drop Miles Sanders in my rankings accordingly. Alvin Kamara is my Sweet 16. He was not able to find the end zone last week like I thought he would, but he was able to rack up 91 yards on the ground. That was his most rushing yards since all the way back in week 6. With the Cleveland Browns giving up 5.5 yards per carry in their last 3 games, 3rd most in the NFL, I like Kamara's chances to break that 100-yard barrier, but at this point, it is clearly too much to ask for a score. At 17, it is Ezekiel Elliott. He continues to be the ultimate vulture. He scored in his 7th straight game for Dallas, and their offense has been on fire lately. Zeke posted a top 12 finish against the Eagles back in week 6, and with his touchdown scoring ability, he is a solid play here once again. Flying up my rankings at 18, I have Jerick McKinnon, who has been the RB1 in back-to-back weeks, basically demanding that you play him or suffer the consequences. I am chasing the points all day against a Seahawks defense that's giving up the second most points per game to the position and 5 yards per carry on the season. He's got 31 touches in his last 2 games. He is clearly becoming a big part of this offense. Tier 6 starts with J.K. Dobbins. He was the only good thing on offense for the Ravens in week 15. He's at 120 yards or more in 2 straight games, and he would also get a big boost if Lamar Jackson is able to make it back. Atlanta is beatable on the ground. Dobbins is the clear #1 right now, although he did miss practice on Tuesday, so we want to make sure that we check reports, and if he is good to go, he will be a solid RB2 option. David Montgomery rounds out my top 20. He parlayed 15 touches into 91 total yards and a pair of scores against Philly. He posted his second top 6 finish in the last 4 weeks. I do not love this matchup with Buffalo, but Monty has finished no lower than an RB2 since back in week 10, and he's basically a guaranteed 15 touch play, so his floor is safe. To 21, it is Raheem Mostert, who could jump up a bit depending on what we hear about Jeff Wilson Jr., but for now I just have him as a solid option after exploding for 156 total yards against the Bills. Mostert has shown an ability to put up big time numbers with the backfield to himself, and if he gets that against Green Bay, he is a must start. The Packers are allowing 6.5 yards per carry over their last 3 games. That is the most in the league. Tier 7 starts with Isiah Pacheco at 22. He had his most carries since back in week 12, but he was unable to find the end zone, and he once again posted more or less a goose in the passing game department. That lack of involvement clearly limits his upside, but he retains his value because he is the clear first and second down back on this team. He is going to crush this ranking if he scores, but he's got just 2 tutties in his 13 games this year. To 23, it is Jamaal Williams. He has failed to record a touchdown in 2 consecutive games for just the second time this season, but he has a decent shot at crossing the goal line against the Panthers. They're allowing over a touchdown per game on the ground, which is 7th most in the NFL. If he can't score, he is likely to disappoint. Williams has not had over 40 rushing yards since week 12. The last RB2 that I have in week 16 is Travis Etienne Jr. I think he finds it difficult to repeat his performance against the Cowboys. New York allows just 4.1 yards per carry on the season, 5th best in the NFL. We have seen spotty usage at best for him in the passing game as well. Etienne is going to have that workhorse role, and that keeps him in the RB2 conversation. Latavius Murray rounds out my top 25. He used a massive week 15 workload to put up 142 yards of total offense on 25 touches, and you can expect more of the same here against a solid Rams front. To be honest, I am not sure if Russell Wilson playing helps him out or not. Either way is going to be tough sledding for him. I think the volume makes him viable, but the upside that he flashed last week is not going to come here. At 26 and at the top of Tier 8, I have DeAndre Swift. He is lower than consensus for me, but I just cannot move him up any higher, even in a solid matchup. The usage for Swifty has been maddening all season long. He's got just 22 looks in his last 2 games. If I can't bank on the touches, then he is nothing more than a risky flex for me. Swift has just 1 finish inside the top 30 in his last 4 games, but we know the upside is real, so play him at your own risk. To 27, it is Rachaad White sitting there. He found space at a premium against the Bengals, which wasn't exactly surprising, but what was concerning was his lack of involvement in the passing game. White saw just 2 targets, and he now has had 3 straight games going backward in that department as Leonard Fournette gets healthier. I love this top 8 matchup with Arizona, but if White cannot get involved in the screen game, his value plummets, and that makes him a risky play in week 16. To 28, I have D'Onta Foreman, who flat out showed a terrifying floor last week, and that is something that I try to avoid with my season on the line. He has not posted a top 25 finish since back in week 10, and his 9 yards on 10 touches does not instill confidence. When we tack on the fact that the Lions are actually the 2nd best team in the league stopping the run over the last 3 weeks, they're allowing under 3 yards per carry, the warning signs are everywhere. he remains a flex consideration only because he could go off if things break right. Next up at 29 is Devin Singletary, who has posted middling production over the last month, failing to get inside the top 20 and recording just a single score. He is losing more and more work to both James Cook and also Nyheim Hines, further frustrating managers. I think he has a shot at a big day against Chicago, but more than likely he'll rack up 40 to 60 scoreless yards than anything else. My ninth and final tier starts with Zonovan Knight, who was absolutely crushed against Detroit last week, taking all the wind out of his sails and relegating him to risky flex territory. Now, Knight could easily take advantage of this matchup. Jacksonville is allowing over 21 points a game to the position, but the Jets offense with Zach Wilson is anything but a sure bet. Knight is as boom bust as it gets. To 31, it is AJ Dillon, who will be a decent option if he is cleared against the Dolphins. He's been able to vulture 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and all of those were RB1 finishes. The usage for him has been spotty, but it has improved over the last 2 weeks, and that gives us some hope. When you are playing Dillon, you are always banking on the score, but he could lose some goal line work because of that injury, which would be worst case scenario if you're playing him. The last running back I am looking at is Leonard Fournette. He travels to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. I think he is a good floor option if you are looking to not bottom out. Lenny is averaging over 10 points a game in his last 4, and he's never dropped below 8. But he does not have a ceiling because he hasn't showcased that since back in week 6. I would not expect that ceiling to show itself here either, so you're only rolling Fournette out if you are confident in your roster elsewhere and you just want to play it safe. A couple of backs who just missed the cut are the Falcons backs, Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier. They travel to Baltimore in a really tough matchup. Brian Robinson Jr. faces a really difficult matchup of his own against San Francisco, Cam Akers against Denver, and finally Gus Edwards at home against Atlanta. And that is everything I got for my Week 16 running back rankings. Please drop any questions, any comments down below. I want to be able to get back to you guys and help you out. If you enjoyed the content today, crush that like button. That continues to move the channel forward, and I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. That way you don't miss anything. And a huge shout out to all of my current subscribers. Thank you guys so much for the support that you have shown me. I am so excited to continue growing together with you guys. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and I will see you next time.